Howdy, this is Austin with Fantasy Baseball on Deck, continuing my how-to series, and specifically in this episode, we're going to talk about how to evaluate pitchers, regardless of kind of their supporting cast and what team they play on, but more to their independent true value as pitchers. Today's goals, in particularly, we're going to identify and manipulate the independent stat categories that matter most to us, and sort of erase what doesn't matter from the equation, so we can better identify who's valuable and who's not as valuable. Number two, we're going to compare two to three comparable players that had the same exact production as meaning like fantasy points scored this past year, but went about it completely different ways, and try to figure out and differentiate which playing style is more sustainable, and how we can sort of use this information to better forecast what their production will be in the future, or 2023. Third, I want to basically teach you how to identify kind of statistical outliers for the good and bad, so you can always make sure that your decision making is to the highest level of understanding and wrapping your head around all these stats that sometimes can be confusing, regardless if this is your first year playing fantasy baseball or you are a pro. If you've never been with me here at Fantasy Baseball Deck, first off, thank you for supporting me. But also, I have a teach, don't preach kind of motto here, an attitude where I'm much more interested in teaching you how to think in comparison to instead of telling you what I think and then moving on to the next topic. I just feel like if we're able to be super transparent with one another, and you truly understand exactly where I'm coming from a thought process and in my perspective, that you and I both get a lot more out of this experience, and that's kind of one of the many value adds to you as the audience. Additionally, why should you trust me? Well, I'm here specifically for free because I love to do this. Fantasy baseball is my number one hobby, and I'm trying to actually make a career out of it. So you can kind of consider this a job interview per se. So I'm putting a lot of effort into this because I want to have a good enough track record to be able to transition my career to do this full time. I have a couple mottos here at Fantasy Baseball on Deck, and number one is that I cannot guarantee you that you're going to win your fantasy baseball championship, but what I can guarantee you is that you are going to score more points than anyone else by a long shot, therefore setting yourself up to be successful. Number two, the motto is I watch and research approximately 30 to 40 hours worth of baseball every single week, essentially so that you don't have to, so that you're constantly up to date and making moves in a manner that's anticipatory, so ahead of your peers, while always staying ahead of the curve while not having to do any of the work. That's kind of the give and take with this relationship between you, the audience, and me, the content creator and analysis guy of baseball things. So what do I need from you? What is the deal here? What is the trade-off? Please just hit the stupid like button. If you care enough to subscribe to me, that would mean a ton. That's kind of my first steps in getting my foot into the door and doing this full time. So I help you win money. You help me achieve my lifelong dreams, per se. So let's jump into the actual meaningful subject matter. I'm going to expand and share my screen. Here we go. If you were to go start looking at specifically ESPN is what I cover mostly, but these concepts that I'm going to teach you are universal and translate across any format or website that you're going to use. But if we look at ESPN specifically and go to the 2023 points league rankings, you're going to go down and you're going to see a whole lot of names, maybe even some auction values, and that's going to be really about it. It doesn't really tell you a whole lot of information. From this point, from this perspective, you don't really have an idea of what everyone's story is. You just see names and teams and positions. So if we were to expand maybe a more in-depth value or a view, we can go to, all right, here's the top 10 kind of starting off. It's going to give me sort of the 2022 stats, the 2023 stats, and a little blurb about what happened last season and kind of what to expect coming into next season. Except, with the very second or third pitcher available, we can see that Max Scherzer is supposed to be the let's say the third best or fourth best starting pitcher available to draft in fantasy baseball coming up this next season, and he is going to be projected at 430 points. But somehow 2 places later at number 12, Aaron Nola is projected to score approximately 42 more points than Max Scherzer. So why would he be ranked behind, kind of thing? So you immediately there's just this cloud of doubt and kind of confusion as to why are things set up this way. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So instead of focusing on any sort of projections, we really want to get all of the past data specifics into one space to be able to focus on it better and really depict the true story of who is independently more valuable than the other. And we'll get into that. Whether you play Yahoo, whether you play on Fantrax, CBS, all these concepts are universal again. So if you go to Yahoo, the first available pitcher to draft is until number 12. That's different. But again, this will help you regardless of what website you use. Go to Fantrax. We see that pitchers score hundreds of points less than the top hitters do. So how can we sort of play that into our hand as well? And essentially, I create this draft tool that you can use. If you go back and watch my very first video, I think it's got around 3,000 views that I've ever made in March of 2022. It basically shows how I go about drafting each year. So I have this draft tool that essentially, and obviously it's unfinished. Most of the highlighting is complete, but I'll have notes in here so that essentially, if you are going through your draft as you complete this step by step, essentially you're able to in real time sort of check mark and box like who you're looking for kind of in the future. Obviously, you can copy and paste this same document into your own Google spreadsheet and sort of make adjustments as you see. But I create this sort of as a tool to keep you organized in the middle of your draft with you. But if we were going to evaluate starting pitchers, let's go ahead and do that. First off, I want to most importantly, I want to establish the difference between independent statistics players. You've heard me talk about this a lot if you've been with me before, but I'm going to go over it again because any individual who is entering the realm of fantasy baseball for the first time or entering the realm of fantasy baseball on deck with me, Austin, for the first time, I really want to communicate what's really important, what's to focus on, and what do you want to sort of remove from your vision so that you can see clearer and make better decisions. As problem solvers, we're all problem solving. So if I was to pull up and kind of conjure all the stats into one place, this is what I've managed to do on my Google spreadsheet as it relates to ESPN points per se. You can adjust the points however you need simply by going to this fantasy points tab and sort of like calculating it on your own as it relates to your league settings. But what I want to get to is identifying the stat categories that we specifically want to focus on. So independently, the most independent stats that we really want to focus on are innings pitched, strikeouts, WHIP, which is walks and hits per innings pitched, and then also ERA and strikeouts per innings pitched. And why these are the most independent variables are these variables are only controlled by the abilities and skills of the pitcher, regardless of what's going on in the game. Baseball is a team sport, but fantasy baseball is all individualized, but there are a lot of team aspects that sort of play into how an individual performs that they have nothing to do with. So individually, we want to make sure that we're keeping track of innings pitched, making sure that our pitchers are essentially getting to around 180 innings per year. That means that they maybe had one tiny IL stint per year, but they were generally like fairly healthy. And then when they did get into the game, they were making quality starts and going far enough into the game to earn wins and all those sort of bonuses. Next, we're going to focus on strikeouts. Strikeouts is, to me, the most important metric that we really want to keep track of when it comes to evaluating starting pitchers, because this really gives us an opportunity to figure out who is limiting the amount of basically traffic around the bases at every turn. If I have an individual who is striking a ton of people out. If you think about striking out a batter, there's no ball put into play. There's no base runners advancing anywhere. Nothing happened. And the points just doubled. So if I was to throw a pitch home and a ball gets dragged to first base, first baseman grounds it, touches first base, that is 1 out and 1 point to you as a fantasy baseball owner. If I'm to throw 3 pitches and strike the batter out, instead of it going into the field of play, that's 2 points to you as a fantasy baseball owner. So already that is a 100% increase or 200%, whatever, double the points compared to a ball in play and a put out. So maximizing both the whole concept of strikeouts limit or eliminate any possibility of base runners that exist or base runners, projected base runners of moving, advancing, or existing on the base paths. You can't have any runs scored against you, negative points incurred if people aren't on the base paths. And then 2, just the overall prospect of more points for the amount of effort put in. If I can strike out 3 batters in an inning, that's worth 6 points. If I can essentially get 3 batters out with anyone reaching on base, that's only 3 points. And you can imagine how that multiplies per inning throughout the rest of the game, and sort of how that sort of covers your tracks too. If there's any mistakes that are made, if there's a bad inning, a player who is striking out more batters has more room for error, compared to the people that do not. So that is the importance of strikeouts. WHIP, I don't have it highlighted all the way down the strip, mostly because walks and hits per innings pitched. You want something around the number 1. You want it to be obviously as low as possible. This is a number like a golf score. You want there to be as close to 0 as possible walks and hits per innings pitched that your pitcher is on average giving up per inning. But anything really above or below 1.2 is pretty good. It's just something to sort of like check in on and just have an idea of like where you're sitting, whether it kind of gives you an idea of kind of what your pitcher's control is and, what their walk rate is and all these different things that play into, the overall story and makeup of what a starting pitcher is and its true value. ERA is obviously very independent. What is their earned run average per 9 innings pitched? This is a number that we want anything 3 and down. So 3.99 and down is ownable in fantasy baseball. Anything above 4 is not something that kind of gets into diminishing returns, regardless of how many strikeouts that you are incurring. You are they're getting beat up in between their strikeouts. They're not making it to 5 innings plus to be able to earn a win. That's just 4 innings, 4 ERA and up. It isn't really ownable, but anything 3 and down is good. Anything in the 2s is great, and anything in the 1s and below is rare and pretty much elite, and that almost doesn't exist anymore in fantasy baseball. And kind of tying together all of these things, but the most important stats from an accounting perspective, what we actually get points for in our fantasy baseball, like head-to-head matchups or however you play, is combining the concepts of innings pitched and strikeouts into 1 and 9. So strikeouts per 9 innings pitched, you always want a number that is above 9. 9 or above essentially means that you are striking out more than, or at least 1 batter per inning, or more than 1 batter per inning on average. And this is really, again, always a really, really good metric to keep track of, to make sure that when your pitcher does have a bad inning, or if he gives up a leadoff double, this is essentially kind of covering your tracks and making sure that you have a guy that can eliminate any threats after that. No balls are put into play because he is so hard to make solid contact with, essentially. So what is the dependent stat? Well, pitchers are way more cloudy they're simple to separate the cloud, but everything surrounding their value is cloudy because we put so much value into these two stupid stats over here, which are wins and losses. Wins and losses have almost nothing to do with a pitcher's performance. If a pitcher goes 8 innings pitched and gives up 1 run, an incredible game, strikes out 17 batters, whatever, they could essentially not have any run support, go into leave the game at 1-1 and not earn a win. So they don't get that bonus points. It's depending on your league. I play in a league where a win is worth 5 points. I play in a league where a win is worth 12, and another one that's worth 8. So I should have said that the other way around, but 5, 8, and 12. You can think about at the end of a fantasy baseball kind of contest, and say like Sunday Night Baseball, you have a pitcher going, and all of a sudden it's a close game. At the very end, you get a bonus worth 12 points to put you over the top. Like, that's huge per start going the rest of the season. Like, wins are something like that we can't control, but man, are they worth a lot. And bonuses, but this is not something we want to focus on because we can't ever determine how much run support a player is going to get. We always want to make sure that we are putting ourselves into a position to earn those wins, but because we're putting out more productive individual players compared to a less productive player on a better team that's going to score a lot, and just hope that he has enough in the tank to get to 5 innings and still be alive and not have been crushed by the other team. Anyways, we want players that are striking out more than 9 batters per inning. And also, like I said before earlier, losses are also a catastrophic dependent stat that sort of ruins everything, because like I said before, again, same concept. If I go 8 innings pitched and 1 run, baseball, strike out 17 people, then I could have essentially no run support whatsoever. The game ends after the next inning, and I take a loss to -5 points, even though I had an incredible day at the office, meaning like your player had an incredible day on the mound. They have 5 points and however many points taken away from them. And this is something that they have nothing to do with. They can't ever contribute towards their own score, except for Shohei Ohtani, who plays both ways per se. So how do we evaluate players, pitchers specifically, to figure out what their actual individual value is as an individual sole of production, sole source of production? Let's look at this fantasy point 2020. So this is the overall total for the year, including all of the stats. So their innings pitched, hits, earned runs, walks, strikeouts, and then minus or plus points for their win bonuses, and subtract however much amount for their loss bonuses, or penalties against them, which overall equates to an overall score. This is an average per game that they incurred. So Sandy Alcantara per game last season averaged 18.1 points per game, but it scored 577 points for the entire year. Well, what I'm interested in doing is essentially, I want to take away the wins and losses, so that no matter what the player, how much run support or luck essentially that the player had, I want to erase all of the dependent stats, meaning I'm going to take away wins and I'm going to take away losses. So what I'm going to do, and what I already did, was I'm going to subtract 14 wins times the 5 points that they're worth. So I'm going to subtract 70 points away from Sandy Alcantara, and I'm going to add back the amount of points that he lost, unbeknownst to him, like it's not his fault, points, back to his score. So I'm going to add 9 times the 5 points against you for a loss back to his score for that remaining 45. So essentially, this category is taking away the win bonuses and replacing and putting back the loss penalties that they had nothing to do with. Again, a pitcher cannot control whether they have run support. All they can control is how many innings they were able to get through, how many batters they were able to get through, and how efficient they were striking people. Moving forward, this is probably the simplest way to sort of extract who is more valuable than the others, just based on their actual value for the entire year instead of their perceived value, which is this number over here, what you would see on your fantasy baseball kind of desktop webpage. So once I do that, we see that Sandy Alcantara is still the most valuable player in fantasy baseball by scoring 552 points by himself without any wins or losses counting for him or against him. And this is essentially going to, again, indicate how valuable everyone is, taking away the factors that they cannot control. So it's now Sandy Alcantara, Corbin Burns, Aaron Nola made a huge jump. Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander, Dylan Cease made a big jump. Alex Manoah, Carlos Rodon, Zach Gallen, and so on. This is the kind of space I'm going to focus in the most, but I will go ahead and sort of cover the other columns just to get that out of the way so that I'm speaking later and more freely. Things make sense. Over here, I basically put in a difference factor that basically said that Sandy Alcantara had 25 more points added to his perceived value fantasy score because he had 5 more wins than losses. So he had 25 points given to him for free that he didn't necessarily earn through bonuses. And that means that's the amount of points that were taken away from Sandy Alcantara, the difference. This little factor here, this little star, just means that if a pitcher had more losses than wins, then they had points actually added to their actual value because they had really good stats, but essentially had no run support, bad luck throughout their game, earned more losses than wins. This is the points added to their actual value score, which Aaron Nola is a really interesting case, and we'll talk about him later. This other section, essentially, and we can sort of we'll look at this and determine that Kyle Wright and Tony Gonsolin and Justin Verlander, Framber Valdez, these teams that scored a lot of runs were the biggest beneficiaries of a lot of run support this past year. Regardless of how successful they were as individuals, they scored the most points from getting the most wins. You can see 21 wins, 16 wins, 18, 17, 17, 15, really high win totals. But if I filter over here, actual value per innings pitched, this is going to better capture, regardless of whether a player had innings restrictions. So say if you were Spencer Strider and you started out the year in the bullpen, and we're only able to get up to 131 innings pitched. He didn't really have an opportunity to score as many points because he wasn't given the volume. He was sort of being protected from himself per se, because he's so young. This is how we're also going to kind of evaluate the production of people who are injured this past year or who are often injured. So Jacob deGrom, as understood from a pitching perspective, is the most dominant player really in all of baseball, regardless of position player. Mike Trout, as a position player, is pretty much the dude as a batter, but Jacob deGrom is the most dominant player, in his sport essentially as a pitcher. But he's always hurt. But if we boil it down to what is their average individual production per innings pitched, then we can sort of determine and figure out, well, if this player's going to be healthy, let's assume it's like a Spencer Strider is going to be healthy coming into this year, given that he is a super young, rookie of the year candidate coming into his second year. How can we sort of project what he is going to score over an entire season now that he's not being restricted? And similarly, the category next door, if I was to filter this, it wouldn't change. How many points can we project these pitchers to essentially score if they all were limited or raised to 180 innings pitched? Kind of that magic number of making sure, a player, obviously your most elite guys are going to go over 200 innings pitched, but on average, if a player is in the top 3 rotation spots and doesn't get skipped for whatever reason and has a healthy year, productive year, they're going to get around 180 innings pitched or more. So this is essentially going to say if everybody pitched the same amount of innings, which is never going to happen, who can we project to be the most quality for that stretch? And this kind of gives you the list. It's going to be Jacob deGrom, Spencer Strider, Justin Verlander, Christian Javier, Shohei Ohtani. It really shows the value of Shohei Ohtani as a pitcher, not just as a hitter, Max Scherzer, and so on. So this is sort of from here on over, the stats that I'm sort of manipulating to better get a clearer bit of value as it pertains to evaluating pitchers. So let's filter this back to just get the overall volume, and I'm going to compare some players to start off, direct comparisons, sort of real life examples of players, and as we evaluate them as they are, as we prepare for our draft coming up. So Christian Javier and Joe Musgrove both have pretty similar pre-rank or ADPs, average draft positions. Joe Musgrove is on ESPN is ranked number 56 overall player, and Christian Javier is ranked number 62 overall. If I'm looking at the innings pitched, comparing the two players, I can say, wow, okay, both players are plenty productive. They fit every mold that I'm asking for. So Christian Javier in 180 or 148 innings pitched had 94 strikeouts. So essentially 11 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched, which is incredible. It's very, very rare that a player can have 40 to 50 more strikeouts per innings pitched. So this is a very rare situation. He had a really, really good ERA, and his actual value score was 414 points. And then if I go down to Joe Musgrove, who pitched essentially 181 innings, 30 plus innings more than Christian Javier, and incurred less strikeouts. So, but though he had plus strikeouts, this is the pitcher who got over the 181 inning threshold. He had plus strikeouts at an incredible 2.93 ERA, and he incurred 413 fantasy points, actual value to him as an individual. What this illustrates is kind of the difference between a quality player and Joe Musgrove that fits all of our asks, but comparing him against a quality plus player, meaning someone who is very, very special, needed essentially 70% of he needed, doing quick math here, he needed 32. Christian Javier needed 32 less innings to score the same amount of points as Joe Musgrove across an entire season. And 32 innings could be a difference of six games started. Essentially, that's a huge stretch. It's like Joe Musgrove starting six turns around in the lineup first, and however many points he has incurred. Then Christian Javier gets to start the season, and let's see where they finished. And Christian Javier is able to sort of surpass him. So it really shows again the quality of and the importance of that strikeout rate. Even though if you don't have the innings pitched necessarily yet, or like in the past season, what you can sort of expect from a productivity standpoint, given that he's going to earn more innings pitched this next season. Christian Javier has always been this productive. He's always been this good. He's been a starter, but for whatever reason, they threw him into the bullpen, I think, trying to take some load off of him and save him for this time in his career when he actually needs to go 180 innings plus per year. And he's going to be one of the most valuable people in the draft because he's going to get that number, but he's going to have essentially 50 more strikeouts, 60 more strikeouts than he has innings pitched, which is really, really special for a good Houston Astros team. So let's go to the next bit of examples. The blue players, I'm going to be comparing 3 this time, and essentially it's going to be kind of similar, comparing pretty much the exact same actual value from a finish this past year. So 2022, how many points did they score as an individual, and sort of compare playing styles. So before we had 2 players that were pretty highly ranked. The only difference was that they both had plus strikeouts, both had really good ERA, but one was able to get a lot more done in a shorter period of time while scoring the same amount of points. Now we're going to look at sort of a similar situation, but all of these players, meaning Max Scherzer, Miles Mikolas, and Robbie Ray, scored essentially 400 points throughout the year. One being Max Scherzer, who is a very elite player, the number 10 overall ranked player, regardless of the position. I was only able to pitch 145 innings last year, 173 strikeouts, an incredible 2.29 ERA. And putting those 3 things together really makes a huge difference. Really, really incredible player, and kind of separates, and you'll see what the difference is. If you have all 3 of these things, you're a top 10 player for a reason. If you have 2 of these things, there's a huge drop off, and we'll see that sort of in a second. Miles Mikolas was a marathon man this past year. He had 202 innings pitched, but had 153 strikeouts. So a very, very poor strikeout rate. Only has around 6.8 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched, which is way below. It's not someone that we'd be super interested in, but it sort of paints the picture of he had 55 essentially more innings pitched than Max Scherzer did, and they scored the exact same amount of points, and essentially had the very, very similar, taking away their wins and losses, they scored the same amount of points. So Max Scherzer had to work 70% of the time that Miles Mikolas did to score the same number of points. You can see sort of the value in that, and also the importance of, though he had all the innings pitched, he was super healthy. He was able to go deep into games. The strikeouts weren't there, and the ERA wasn't there, which is overall a kind of killers to having a really elite pitcher. So Let's compare Max Scherzer and recent Cy Young Award winner Robbie Ray. Robbie Ray always pitches for a ton of innings. And he also is one of the AL leaders in strikeouts. So this is someone who, like, more interestingly, is ranked 40th. So Robbie Ray at 40, and Max Scherzer at number 10 overall. Let's compare those two guys. So if you think to yourself, well, I'll let the first tier of pitchers go because I'm more interested in going at batters. I can get Robbie Ray, and Robbie Ray is going to score the same amount as Max Scherzer. Well, this is the kind of the contrary, and how we can sort of forecast and figure out what the true difference is and like what the true value is for next season when they're both healthy and go for an entire year, ideally. So if we look at Max Scherzer, he is essentially, if 80 innings pitched of time, he is going to score approximately 500 points for the entire season, because if he was to get to 180 innings pitched, his strikeout rate is going to still be probably 30 to 40 strikeouts above innings pitched, and his ERA is still going to be great. So he's checked all three boxes. With Robbie Ray specifically, Robbie Ray historically always pitches a ton of innings, always pitches a ton of strikeouts, but never has that elite of an ERA. And what is the difference? The difference is approximately 120 points for the entire year. If Robbie Ray's projected to, and this is last year's stat, they had similar strikeout rates. Robbie Ray pitched a ton more innings, but because he's giving up that many more runs per game, or per 9 innings, this is basically equates to around 120 points, meaning that he is the 40th ranked player instead of a 10th ranked player. That's sort of the idea of, if you let a Corbin Burns or a Max Scherzer or a Garrett Cole go and you settle for Robbie Ray is going to be great, but Robbie Ray is a difference of 120 points. And that's sort of how you can identify that. Let's go down to these orange players and compare Kyle Wright versus Chris Bassitt. What's a situation if you have two people who are essentially the exact same in every way? So Kyle Wright and Chris Bassitt both pitched 180 innings. They both had a very similar strikeout rate. Their ERAs were the same, and they scored approximately the same amount of points. So, we're going to not just say that they're worth the same and just go for the cheaper guy, meaning Chris Bassitt's currently ranked at 86th overall for pre-rankings, and Kyle Wright is currently ranked at number 95. Let's dig a little further into this, but overall it's going to be pretty easy. Both teams, Chris Bassitt is going to be on a team that scored the fourth most runs in baseball last year. Kyle Wright was on the team that scored the third most runs in baseball last year. They're going to be approximately the same production over the year. And you essentially are just trying to put yourself into the situation of, are they healthy? Are they going into a situation where they're going to get a lot of run support? Are they going to be limited by innings? If the answers are no, you're just sort of going to default to flipping a coin or going to the cheaper option again, because, they had the same stats all the way across. There's really nothing you can do other than just kind of pick the better offensive team. And that's probably the most subjective thing I'm going to say to you as a fantasy baseball analyst, really ever on the show. But that's kind of that's the case with this situation. And next, we're going to scroll over to, again, the actual value per innings pitched section. And we're going to sort of, identify which players are kind of the draft day bargains, and uncovering hidden value, with guys that have no inning restrictions. So like people that are pretty established, but for whatever reason kind of had bad luck this past season. And just sort of to make to go over a couple of different highlights. And I messed up, I hit the wrong tab. Aaron Nola was the third most productive player at pitcher this past season, one of the most underrated players in baseball, at least as a pitcher. And he is the third most productive player, but he is currently ranked 12th. That's a great example. Dylan Cease the actual value was number 6 overall as a starting pitcher, as an individual player. And he is currently ranked at number 28. Zach Gallen is the 9th most productive player as an individual, but he's ranked 58th. Tristan McKenzie was the 13th most productive player as an individual, but he is ranked at a pre-draft ranking at number 66. So I think these are the best bargains you're going to get kind of coming into the year, with expectations that there's no sort of restrictions. They can throw their arms off. They're never going to get pulled out of a game at 8 innings pitched because they're old enough to kind of take the baton on. So again, Aaron Nola, Dylan Cease, Zach Gallen, Tristan McKenzie are kind of your best draft day bargains, in my opinion. And then if we go to talk about, again, kind of the quality and those guys that do have any restrictions, or at least did last year, let's focus on those. So if we talk about the players who are most efficient when they're healthy, or most efficient because they're young, I'm kind of disregarding the older people that are expected to get hurt, so I didn't highlight Jacob deGrom. But if we look at the young guys, Spencer Strider, Shane McClanahan. Spencer Strider was reduced because of innings pitched. Shane McClanahan had a shoulder injury kind of at the end of the year, made it back to end the season. And Tyler Glasnow, Tony Gonsolin and Jeffrey Springs down here, as well as Jesus Luzardo, you can sort of see that how productive or how productive they are and how lowly rated they are. So really uncovering, some real hidden value because of X, Y, and Z that you can't see through a box score. So I already said Spencer Strider is the second most productive player per inning in all of baseball. He's currently ranked at number 30. It's a great value. Shane McClanahan is ranked at number 25, but was the seventh most productive player per innings pitched. Tyler Glasnow being the 11th most productive player in this category, but is ranked 46th. Tony Gonsolin being ranked 14th, or it was the 14th most productive, but being ranked at 145. Jeffrey Springs being the 20th most productive player in this category, but ranked at 150. And Jesus Luzardo, got kind of due to an injury off and on the IL, was the 21st most productive player in this category, but is ranked all the way down at 207. So I'd say that this is your best draft day bargains for guys that you are sort of like looking to stay ahead of the curve on. People haven't necessarily heard or bought into these people because they're super young or they're coming off of an injury, but according to the statistics and the quality of innings pitched and points incurred, these are the most valuable people. So that's the end of the show today. I really hope that you guys got a lot out of it. I love doing this, or look forward to talking to you soon, and go Red Legs. Bye.